November 1971, one of the most famous bank heists in history occurred, and it wasn't even committed at a bank. More interestingly, most bank heists, as the name would suggest, happened at a bank where someone broke into a bank and they stole whatever money they wanted. People got hurt, blah, 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 blah. But this bank heist was different because the police actually gave him money because they couldn't risk the lives of other people. And it became known as one of the most infamous bank heists because until today, this man was never caught. So here's the story of D.B. Cooper. But before we get into that, I'd like to remind you to subscribe. It really helps out, and I really need it. But yeah, that's it. Let's get into it. So, November 1971, a man who went through airport security and identified himself as D.B. Cooper, or Daniel Cooper, really, bought a one-way ticket to Washington for very cheap, because at the time it was a lot cheaper. And he was described as wearing, like, a nice suit, sort of. He had a briefcase and a hat, and he looked like an overall normal person, normal businessman, some would say, who saw him. But realistically, he somehow walked through security with bombs. And so once they were airborne, he wants to make his presence known, but not so that all the other passengers freak out. So what he does is he gives the flight attendant, a female flight attendant, a note. And the flight attendant, I guess, was used to getting hit on by older guys, which is a bit strange, but she just put the note in her pocket and just ignored it. So when she came back to D.B. Cooper to, like, serve drinks and whatnot, he sort of leaned in and told her, "You should really check the note. I have a bomb." And he opens his bag and shows what looks like red dynamite with a bunch of wires. They don't actually know if it was a real bomb, but they do know that he was threatening a bomb. And so she immediately goes into, like, this calmed sort of panic mode, and she sits next to D.B. Cooper, and D.B. Cooper makes his demands very, very clear. He says, "I want parachutes, I want $200,000, and I want a refueling truck ready when we land so we could take off and go to Mexico." All right. And so she goes and alerts the pilots. The pilots call the FBI, they call 911, and everyone is basically at the landing spot. They get all the passengers off because he allowed them to go. Most of them didn't actually even know anything was wrong. They just thought it was a quick landing, but they landed. He let everyone off except the flight attendants and the two pilots. And so when they landed, there was a refueling truck ready. They put fuel in the engines, and the police were there with the $200,000 and the parachutes they got from a local school. And he says he wants certain flight configurations, like certain flaps to be on the whole flight, certain altitude, certain flight path that would lead them to Mexico. But after negotiating with the pilot says that they'll take a different route so that they can refuel again, because that way they'll never make it there. And so they start to head to a city a bit lower than Nevada. And once in the air, they're still freaking out because he's got a supposed bomb. But the pilot gets an open door notification, which on airplanes is usually a terrible thing. It means, like, the inside has combusted, the plane's basically gonna self-destruct, but nothing was happening. So they thought, oh, it's maybe a misfire, and they sent one of the flight attendants at the back to go and check what it was. But when they checked, D.B. Cooper wasn't there anymore. and the door was indeed open, but I guess because they were flying at such low speeds due to his configurations, uh, he was able to jump out basically without being sucked out. Yes, I just did a sound effect, and guess what? Nobody knows I'm doing YouTube, and I need your help to get to 100,000 subscribers to try and tell my parents, because if you don't know, I still live with my parents, and nobody knows that I'm doing YouTube. So I really need your help to subscribe. I want to tell them once I get a big number so that I can continue doing it. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe. And so they land, and the police start basically one of history's biggest manhunts for this guy, because not only did he threaten human lives, but he did it on an airplane, right? He stole $200,000 that the cops had to give him, and he just endangered human life and cost the airline thousands of dollars in fuels. And so, after searching extensively, because they believe he jumped somewhere over the rainforest of Nevada, they find nothing. And over 45 years, they still continue to find nothing. And it's become one of the most famed bank heists because it was the one time the guy was never thought. Now, there are, yes, a lot of theories as to what really happened concerning after he jumped out of the plane. Many think that he maybe didn't send the parachute up and died. Many think he died in the wilderness. Many think also that he somehow made it to his home and spent the $200,000. But nobody really knows, and nobody could identify him because I guess his real name was not D.B. Cooper. And so until today, it sort of remains a mystery, and many people have made fake confessions. There have been people who mysteriously found $200,000 in their bank accounts, but every time the FBI ran a lead on that, they proved to be false, and just people who sort of wanted like last-minute fame before death type of thing. And they do have sketchings of D.B. Cooper, but they just never found him, which led people to speculate that maybe he went and sort of bought wood with the money and just lived off the grid for the rest of his life. But yeah, they don't know what happened to him. And there's also been theories that he was a pilot of sorts, and that maybe he had a plane and took off somewhere, because the configurations that he put for the plane were oddly specific, as if he had flown the route himself before. But again, there was no evidence, and the story of D.B. Cooper remains a mystery as to who was actually the man behind the crime. I'd like to hear what you guys think in the comments. Is there any other stories you guys would like to listen to? Before you go, I'd like to ask you to subscribe. It really helps out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.